So it's there. We are live. So this is all good fun. So for those of you that are joining us live on LinkedIn, welcome to the first of a kind for us anyway. And I don't know whether we're going to be repeating this, but the LinkedIn Live Cloudy with a Chance of Insights episode is good to go. For those that don't know, who haven't seen our show before, basically we cover off what we think has been important news over the last 2 weeks. This is bi-weekly around the Microsoft Cloud, with a focus ideally across the whole piece. So not just one particular area like security or infra, but across the whole of the Microsoft stack. We are all, well, two of us are ex-Microsoft. We all currently work for IBM, but it's important to note that these views shown on here are our own and they're not representative of those of either IBM or Microsoft. Anyway, now that that piece is out of the way, want to sort of talk about why we're doing this for this session, and then we'll just go into the main part. So in effect, we're actually doing this as like a test. So from within IBM, we want to actually see whether LinkedIn Live is a reasonable platform for doing more client-focused webinars. And we wanted to test it in a way that wasn't going to be too drastic if it failed. So you, the lovely audience that are watching this live, get to see how it works. So any feedback you've got, please put it into the chat window. Any questions as well, feel free to do that. Otherwise, we will start on with the episode. And we've got a sort of a bumper one today. So both Cyrus and David have got a few topics that have come out from Build and some other related events. I think David's one of them is talking about the NVIDIA keynote. And then Cyrus has got another few coming out from Build as well, including, I think, Entra ID agent, which is a topic that is something that I'm certainly interested. And I'm going to pick up a little bit about the NLWeb piece. But before we go into that, it is sort of traditional for me to go onto a little bit of a tangent around other things that might have been going on. So I've had my head buried in several YouTube videos over the last couple of days. Primarily because I've accepted a challenge. I don't know whether he meant it as a challenge, but my autistic brain took it as a challenge of getting all the Microsoft Cloud certifications. Luckily, no timescale, so this could take 10 years, who knows, but going through that. So I thought I would start with the AI ones because they seemed most relevant to where IBM is in terms of the business and also where Microsoft is focusing. So I have a plan to do AI 900, then obviously go up through the AI stack before I move on to the next one. So there is another video that explains how that is working and what my purpose is of that, because one of the things that I noticed when I was doing this a year or so ago, for the last time I actually did a cert, was that even if no one watched it, it was really good for me to actually sit here, prepare like a deck, structure it, even do like some walkthroughs and demos for subject areas where I wasn't that au fait with or wasn't using in a day-to-day basis. So I'm going to do that again. I'm going to put it internally into IBM. I'm going to put it actually onto YouTube as well. If people like it, great. I'm not trying to be John Savile or anything else like this. This is actually primarily for my learning purposes. But if other people get benefit out of it, then great. So that's yes. I don't have the physique for that at all.
Oh my God.
But anyway, and you'll notice I'm sitting down, not standing up, scribbling on a whiteboard. But anyway, that is basically what I've been up to, and it's I think it does go quite nicely with what we're doing here. But we'll see how that pans out over the course of the next 3 to 6 months or so. So after my usual sort of waffle intro, Cyrus, I will pass it across to you to talk about some of the things that you found interesting coming out of Build. And as I said, a particular interest for me is the Entra agent ID piece, but over to you.
Thanks, Richard. Again, I also have a slightly autistic brain, and I'd love to digress before telling why this news is important or not. So I'm going to share my screen as it's the first time we're doing that live. And so I know we have mainly our audience on the Spotify and Apple Podcast. But because we're live now, it's just like going to do a demo, and I'm going to explain as much as I can. So it's the first time I hope it works. I'm going to launch my VMware. And just before, can you see the screen?
I can see it from this side, so I'm assuming our
Yeah.
audience can see it as well.
Hopefully, cool. Okay. So I'm launching a Kali Linux, and before I start, this is a podcast we created on the side. It's not sponsored by IBM. It's not sponsored by Microsoft, as Richard say. So and we don't have dedicated lawyers. So whatever I'm going to show is normally safe to show. It's very old, and I completely changed the name of the scripts that you can find online. So instead of having the real repo, I'm going to use my own one. So the script is going to be called Evil Cyrus, but for whoever know a bit of cybersecurity, you will probably recognize what tool I'm using that is very old and probably deprecated. I just made it work. So I'm going to call it Evil Cyrus, but please, if you know that tool, don't necessarily mention it. So what this tool is doing, probably you recognize that interface, but I'm going to choose randomly, for example, an account, for example, Instagram, Apple, TikTok, Microsoft. But in our case, we do Microsoft. So I'm going to put 12 here. And here, what it's going to do, you can create a local server or something with a Serveo. It's a free one. You can create a DNS associated to a PHP server. I'm going to create the server. Oh, sorry. I have to launch it with sudo. Number 12, this server. We'll try again. So the aim is to show that actually password is not safe. We know that, we say that for years, but it's sometimes good to see and to feel what we're discussing about. It's not just the ideas and theory. So they're creating the victim link, and hopefully it works because it works multiple times. And exactly for a demo, it stopped working, the server. Okay, I'm going to try again one more time with localhost this time. Okay, well, localhost works. I wanted to show you the online version, but I'll show you maybe in a different time. So here you can see it's from 2018, so it's an old version, so I don't want to be in trouble. But you see this page was created, and the server, what it does is embed that localhost to a real domain that is ready to use and ready to put in a frame. And then you can start and test your users. And for example, here I can say, we talk about John Saville, so I'm going to put Joel at saville.com. There's a joke, and I put a password, I put sign in. And usually when people get attacked, what happens is after that, they say, oh, nothing happened. I click on the link and nothing happened, and they think nothing happened. But what happened is behind the hood is here, you have the tool. If it was working with the server just before, you can see exactly, I wanted to show you my IP address behind the VPN, of course, where I am. They're located. You have a map on Google Map on where approximately the server or the closest servers is connected. Sometimes in some country, you can even see where the people lives. And you see here the password I typed in clear. So quickly, that demo was to show that password we know is really old school, and we should not use that anymore. I'm going to quickly now share the news. So in Build, they announced that as of today, as of Build, so as of last week, all new Entra account comes with passwordless by default. They don't ask you to create a password. It's passwordless by default. And you start the process with a temporary access code that is disappearing after one use. The user is prompted to quickly set an MFA with the modern MFA, so Microsoft Authenticator or anything else. And then also the second news is Passkey. Before you had to work with the admins and have a team to help the users to create that. But now there is an onboarding process for Passkeys. So quickly, I'm going to try something really that was never done before. I'm going to move that window quickly. And I'm so happy you mentioned John Saville, Richard, because I inspired myself for this slide from him because he did a super 49 minutes videos on Passkey. Obviously, I don't want to do that now. I will try in less than 3 minutes to explain what's Passkey for the audience. I hope you can see my screen now. Normally, you should see the screen. So quickly passkey, as we saw, the password is something we don't want. And you saw the users, they don't even know they got hijacked. And of course, the password is, we know it's not working, it's not good. So then invented, we had like OTP, one-time passcode. You receive a text message, and you have like or you receive some code temporarily that you can use in addition to your password. It was a 2FA, but even that, it's not safe, because you know that a text message will rely on the edge network, which is like 2G, and it's easy to, easy. You just need a not allowed antenna, but it's easy to find. On that, you can steal text message. It's so easy to do, and you can see plenty of videos already online doing that. That's not good. Then FIDO was invented, and there's a consortium of plenty of companies. There's Microsoft, there's French companies, there's German companies, they all together to remove password. FIDO version 1 was a bit complex to implement, require technologies and etc. But the main thing was they bring what is known that works. For example, HTTPS, it works with private key and public key. Okay. Then we know that we invented like the Auth app, which is native. For example, with our Microsoft is the Authenticator app. But the problem is users now can accept by mistake. You know, you don't check if the user is in front of the PC. They get alert fatigue, notification fatigue, and if we have time, the demo, I stole the password of the user, but I can show you how easy it is to also control the cookie or the session of the user. I'm not saying that Authenticator is not secure enough. It's 99% secure because you know that if we implement that, 99% of the attack is not working, according to IBM and Microsoft security research. But it's relying again on the weakest link of the security chain, the user. So FIDO came and said, okay, we want passwordless. The goal is to eliminate password. And this is not a Microsoft thing again. It's everyone is working on that. But the way Microsoft works is nice. And quickly, there's 3 parties that works. A relying party is the website, the user, and the authenticator. So how it works, private key that is never going out, that is used to sign something that is called a nonce, not using more than once. You sign that with 2 things, your biometry, or PIN, that is if you use Windows Hello for business, and with an intent and gesture. So it's definitely you, and you sign it, and it's going on the website. That is called then an RPID, relying party ID. Quickly, why it's good? Because you have the security, the presence proximity. So we know that a scammer cannot do what I've done just before. You cannot just send an email or whatever and ask the person to connect, because it will always check for the security presence, and also check the URL match the RPID, which is also the URL. So I cannot send you, for example, Microsoft with a 0 or these kind of things, or like what happened recently in France. We have gov.france, gov.fr, like gov.uk, and they created the domain with Q. So cov.fr, and the Q and G looks the same. So a lot of people got tricked. So human going to be tricked anyway. And the genius things with Passkeys is going to check for you. The robot is going to check for you. It's never you. With that, you can't be phished, because you check the URL and you check that with Bluetooth you're present, and there is no password. So hacking the website is useless because it's only the public key. The private key never goes out. It's not a password, it's a private key, and you use the authenticator. So now I remove that, quickly go back. And Microsoft released some numbers in the build. 1 million passkey are created every day, and they want to do that at a faster pace. An interesting fact for admins, the success factor for the user to connect with password is 32%. So, I don't, like they saw that user, when they create password, they forget, and it doesn't work, they do typos, and they show, they put show my password, and the admin, the agent that's connected remotely can see so many things, 32%. With passkey, 98%. So it's not a complex thing. It's simpler, it's safer. You have to use it. So it's excellent news. The next one I had in mind that you mentioned, and sorry for whoever's know, we said John Saville multiple times, and you mentioned the arm quickly as a little joke. Yes, he looks like a bodybuilder if you don't know him, but if you do Microsoft, you have to add him to your list of YouTube videos and blog. even today, me to learn something, I always check first if there's a video on John Saville before even going to Microsoft Learn. And I remember for the certification, Richard, you mentioned, I passed most of them checking if he did a video and learning with him. And I remember even one day to just fall asleep watching him. I was in my bed watching on my phone, slept. And the next morning, my wife was watching me a bit weird, and she said, normally people watch bodybuilders in the gym, not in the bed. So I don't know. It was a weird vibe, but yes, John Saville is definitely someone to add in your list. So digression apart, for Entra, where is my notes here? Yes. So we discussed about the agents, and we made the comparison with Agent Smith from the Matrix, and the agent can do plenty of things. But now Microsoft treat them like real humans, and I know David is going to discuss about Entra Agent ID, but on the security level, they are treated now like humans. So they have their own identities, and it's in preview, of course, but you can manage them as you manage a user soon. That is saying a lot about the vision of Microsoft for them and how secure they must be. On other news that was catching my attention is the Defender integration for Azure AI Foundry. It's a preview, but they didn't say that, so that's my interpretation. So Defender for Cloud Alert will be normally visible from Azure AI Foundry. And why that is interesting? It's interesting because we talked a lot about DevSecOps and etc. But so for me, that is now automated DevSecOps because the alerts are not seen only by the security team, but directly by the developers that are creating mess. No, they don't create mess, but the mistakes they can do or the security breach they can bring, the users will have the alert in front of their face. And that's the most efficient way to make the dev team work with security team, because they will have to close that incident they create or the alert they created, and that you can't do better than that. So I'm really interested by seeing how they implement that. I haven't tested yet. What else is the news? Yeah, I tried to see on the build page. There was plenty of news. One of them caught my attention too. Is called administrator protection. So administrator protection is how you build an app and how Windows behave with some permission you want to get. So now if you want to get the access to the webcam, to the microphone, to the screen sharing on some secure resources, you will have to wait for the explicit user content. Before it was off by default, now it's on. And I did some cross-referencing because they talked about something else for the same feature. So I don't know which one is true. Both of them probably are true. They said that for the secure resources, you also need JIT, so just in time. And if that is true, and it should be true, you avoid plenty of malware and ransomware, etc., because it's just in time avoid or they have to do the attack immediately, but it's already good with just in time because you can see the behavior with Defender. So I don't want to talk too much. There's plenty of things we can say about build. Yeah.
No, that's absolutely fine, Cyrus. I must admit, the Entra piece, I know David's going to talk about that a little bit later on, I think is really, really important. I think that you have to treat everything on your network, regardless of what it is, whether it's a person, whether it's a device, whether it's an agent, whatever it is, as an identity. So I think that's going to be really, really key going forward to see how that actually pans out and gets sort of integrated into services. Mine is going to be quite quick this week. So I'm still only about 4 or 5 sessions apart from the keynotes into all the build content. I've literally got my screen paused, if you can see it here, on Mark Rasanovic's Azure piece on Azure Boost, which looks quite interesting from an infrastructure perspective. But that's literally all I've got to on that one. So I wanted to talk a little bit about NLWeb, and again, we do seem to be name checking John Saville quite a lot in this one. But so I'm not going to go into any depth of it on NLWeb. He did a really good sort of overview of that, and there's a couple of other really good ones which I'm going to link into in the show notes. But what struck me about NLWeb, and that stands for Natural Language Web, which is basically a way of enabling website owners to make their websites AI compatible, for want of a better word, and to provide services. So you can query a website. Some of the examples they gave were like recipe websites or perhaps travel booking websites. You say, okay, I want a room for 2 people, walking distance to a beach, and you can write that query, natural language, into the website, and then the website will respond to that. So interest in the chap that is developing it, or developed it, whose name I can't remember at the moment, but I'll put in the show notes, was the guy behind RSS and worked on schema.org as well, which is really interesting because that's what they are starting to use for this. So you're basically looking for structured data. And I don't know, David, whether you remember, I pinged you earlier on in the week when we were talking about this, and I was going, I remember something called semantic web from about, I don't know, 7 or 8 years ago, however long it was when I was doing this. And semantic web was a way basically of describing components within a website. So if you had a person entry, you would have a HTML tag around it that said type equals person. And the idea was that the browsers and the internet in general would be able to understand then the context of what that element was within the website. So what I didn't realize when I was having this conversation with David is actually that evolved into the schema.org, which is in effect what they're using for NLWeb. So that I thought was actually really quite weird in the way that my sort of connections with that worked. And obviously there's a whole piece around MCP in there as well, because basically every NL website becomes an MCP server, which means that you can then hook into the external pieces, which really follows in, on my mind anyway, around what Satya has been saying over the last couple of days about the sort of interface for AI. And I think if this trend continues, I mean, in effect, a website is a massive database anyway. If you actually take the sort of, the graphical layer off of it, it is just a big database. So in effect, we've got an area where we've got 100 million, 200 million, whatever it is, databases out there full of data, hopefully structured, which in theory you can start to leverage with some of these. So anyway, that was NLWeb. I'll be really interested to see what's going on with that. It's open source, and I think it has to be open source because otherwise this just wouldn't work. There is a GitHub repository, which I spent some time on this morning, and I will be attempting to stand this up on the Mac at some point over the next couple of days to see actually how it actually works. And I'll feed that back into it, which actually goes into the AI 900 piece, but probably a little bit further down the road than that. But anyway, one other thing that sort of came up during this whole piece, and actually I'm going to blame Cyrus for this, when he was talking about IRM the other day, when he meant insider risk management. When you get to be in IT for as long as I have been, acronyms get reused. So when Cyrus was talking about IRM, my head was going information rights management. I joined a call with some of our, I was going to say colleagues, they're not really colleagues, but some of our friends at GitHub. And I joined a bit late, and they were talking about ADO. And they're going, oh, ADO this, ADO that. And I was going, why are they talking about ActiveX data objects? But they weren't. They were talking about Azure DevOps. And MCP struck me as being something very like that, because I don't know. Again, this is my age. But as soon as someone says MCP to me, my mind goes to Tron and the Master Control Program, which was the big evil baddie in Tron that was trying to control everything.
See,
but anyway,
certified professional for me, Richard, every day. MCP.
Oh yeah, yeah. Mike, first, I didn't even think about that. Just shows where my mental level is, doesn't it? Goes to a 1970s, 80s sci-fi film. But anyway, never mind. Joys of acronyms within IT. So anyway, enough from me. I will pass it across to David to sort of tail this off with some interesting things, including Cosmos DB, another piece on Entra ID agent or Entra agent ID, and a Azure piece as well, I think, if I remember correctly from the notes that I didn't take.
Yeah, so I want to start with something that didn't massively grab their headlines during build, and that was Global Secondary Indexes, GSIs, another acronym, for Cosmos DB, and those are now in preview. And if you've ever had to retrofit a query pattern onto a live partition system, you're going to know why I'm covering this. So here's the scenario. You launch your app, you pick a petition key. So let's say user ID, right? That's an obvious one for a big system. You want to be able to query by user ID, and everything works fine until 6 months later, and the business now needs queries by email or by region or by some other field that was never part of the original plan, right? Now, you're either into restructuring data, you're into writing, dare I say, gnarly sort of cross-petition queries, spinning up duct tape. Do we do that in IT? We do, don't we? Duct tape pipelines to help duplicate writes. You know, there are many things that people have had to do to try and work around these. So GSIs now let you say, hey, Cosmos, I want a new view of this data with a different petition key. So you get a new container in sync with your main one, but optimized for different reads. It's read-only, it's independently scalable, and it doesn't impact your write path, which is really important, obviously. So doing that, you can optimize your query performance, you can isolate workloads, all without having to remodel your data. And obviously that's super important for the high volume apps. And of course, evolving microservices, because these things don't stay the same. The whole point of microservices is you rip it out, put a new one in, right? So where those access patterns change over time, you can accommodate those. So I guess, you know, if you've ever held your head in your hands at the thought of having to redesign that petition strategy, GSOs might actually be a really, really helpful input to folk there. And you know, like I say, it wasn't really obvious in the build sessions, so something people can go and look at. A couple of other things. So Microsoft Discovery. So this is a platform that's built for enterprise-grade AI-powered R&D. So thinking of sort of semantic knowledge graphs, HPC simulations, and a whole swarm of agents working together collaboratively, which sounds pretty impressive. And it is impressive. It's been used by the Microsoft researchers to develop a new coolant prototype. So this is a material that didn't exist before they started, right? And you're probably getting to this, Richard, in some of those sessions that you were talking about. But, you know, they did this in just over, I think it was 200 hours. And that is a process that would normally take months, if not years, to do. So, you know, Discovery allows you to sort of define agent roles. So whether you're reviewing literature or a simulation specialist, and have them all working together, coordinated by Copilot, UI for AI. We've got to get that in. And, you know, the whole thing is built on Azure. It's governed in Purview, which makes it viable for serious enterprise use. Obviously, it's improving stuff, but, you know, the capabilities there. And I guess why this matters is that sort of this AI is, how can I say, is embedded into the scientific method. Yeah. So it's not just helping you search, it's helping you reason, explore, hypothesize, and validate things. So super interesting thing. You ought to go look at that. It's all gated at the moment, so I've registered for more information, but I've not got access. Be super interesting if anyone that's watching this or listening to this has got access and can tell us what they think about it.
Absolutely. And I mean, that was on, was it that day 2 keynote, or was that the day 1 keynote, right at the tail end?
I was watching, yes.
It was on one of the tail ends of one of the either day 1 or day 2 keynote. And I think you mentioned it, David. It was really interesting because not only did they talk about this conceptually and said, "Hey, look, we've done this, and we've asked it to give us some materials that we think was going to meet these criteria." And they gave us like 3 responses, and it was a little bit all chemical, so the nice chemical symbols on a screen. But then they said, "Well, actually, we made it." So it wasn't just theoretical. We actually went and created this new coolant, and they had it running in a lab somewhere, I'm assuming in Seattle, which I thought was really interesting. It wasn't just theory, that they actually went and actually did something concrete out of the back of this. But,
super, super interesting. All right. Couple of other things. Something else that I heard a little bit in build and then made me go watch something else. So this was it actually made me want to go back and listen to Jensen Huang, I always get his surname wrong, from NVIDIA's GTC keynote, because he touched on this concept of AI factories and the token economy. Thank you. And he was using a really strong industrial metaphor. And he was saying, in the future, every company will run two factories, right? One for manufacturing and building the product, one for the maths and AI that's going to generate the tokens for that product that they're producing, right? Super interesting. And we know that tokens aren't just bits of text, right? They're ingredients. They're what AI uses to compose answers to code, research, and, as we were saying, proteins, new things. And he framed this as a shift from retrieval-based computing. So, historically, you ask a computer to do something, it goes fine, looks at a file, comes back, does something with the file, gives it back to you, right? To generative computing, where the systems are actively producing value. And then you add that to the sort of the demand that we're seeing for AI, and they talk about some of the data center sizes, I think in Mark's session, I don't know if he got there yet. Huge things. And, he was saying that it's like 100x higher than what they was expected last year. And obviously it's growing exponentially. And in order to be able to manage and orchestrate all this, they've had to create new technologies to sort of manage the infrastructure. So they've created something called NVIDIA Dynamo, which is a piece of software that he's calling the operating system of the AI factory. Now, he said, they're using VMware today, so traditional cloud infrastructure, like VMs, Kubernetes, VMware, Hyper-V, or to say Hyper-V, people use Hyper-V as well. Built for enterprise IT, sort of general purpose workloads, databases, web servers, all that stuff. But like you said, Richard, so AI is changing. So the new workloads aren't spreadsheets, they're not dashboards, they're agents, right? It's thousands and thousands of agents, all generating reasoning, all responding in real time. And, he was pretty brutal in how he was describing it. He's saying he's got whether a user prompt is simple or complex, GPUs need to be dynamically allocated. You're juggling things like, I think I wrote it down, pipeline parallelism, tensor parallelism, sorry, I'm reading, expert models, memory hierarchies, KV cache routing, and dynamic inferencing all at scale. That's not traditional orchestration, right? Something completely new. And Dynamo does all of it. It's probably way beyond my abilities, but I'd be quite interested to go and look at it. And he's comparing it to the original Dynamo, the thing that kicked off the Industrial Revolution, basically turned water into steam into power, right? And this is how he's framing it. So super interesting. He then goes on to talk about the scale of factories, how you can push those factories to something like 2.5 million tokens a second under ideal conditions. And, if you're pricing that for something like ChatGPT, let's say, so for $10 per million tokens, that's like 25 million of generative output per second per factory, right? That's stupendous numbers. So, probably something to look at, I think, and get to understand. And some of the Microsoft build sessions, this is where the link back is to build, covered the size of the data centers, the chips they're using, all that stuff. So go look. And then I was going to talk about the tokens thing. So there was talk of giving every agent an ID. So you were talking about this earlier, right? And that's super interesting. It gives every agent its own identity, policies, life cycle. You kind of see the importance behind giving those things those identities, right? And I completely agree. You need to be able to manage and control it. But let's be somewhat pessimistic, because we've not really been pessimistic yet on this call.
No, unusual for us as well.
I know. I feel it's my duty, Richard. Anyway, but if you think about, if every organization is going to have thousands upon thousands of agents, and they've got identities and they're using Entra and they're having policies applied to them, you're going to have to start paying for those, right? So at the moment, I think mostly it's free, right? I don't think I've seen anything explicitly that says those agent identities are paid for yet. But as time goes on, as they become the primary vectors of attack, because the humans aren't going to be doing that much anymore, right? So the agents are going to be doing all this stuff. People are going to be trying to attack the agents, and they're going to be wrapping more and more security and stuff around it. Then, I think we probably need to have a conversation about that, because how do you then, you have, at the moment, the workforce is pretty constrained by the amount an organization will pay for the workforce, right? It's a given size and shape, and it'll shrink some and it'll grow some, but generally there's a bounding there. What bounding is there behind agents? When is enough, right? Is it 10? Is it 20? Is it 30? Is it 2,000? Is it 10,000? Is it going to be licensing that tempers the use of agents in an enterprise? And if it's licensing that tempers that, are people going to be asking for more out of those agents? And we're going to see a shift, because at the moment you have sort of fairly specialized agents, right? So we had the big general things, and now you're going smaller and smaller and smaller to specific ones that do specific things.
Yeah.
What's the size and the shape of that thing that will have demonstrable value, right, without breaking the bank in terms of licensing costs? And I think it's going to be a super interesting thing to watch to see how that matures. That was it.
You raise a very good point, I think, because if you look at what's happening with at least what I think is happening with the sort of agents and the identity world, is we're actually sort of going to this sort of extreme microservices type model, where we have multiple agents all specializing in one particular business area, context, whatever you might want to call it. And then you do have the question is, okay, that's great individually. You've got one microservice that does one thing, or one agent that does one thing. Then you've got 100 or 1,000, what it is. How do you have that compliance layer over the top of that to make sure that you're not necessarily from a security perspective, because that's one issue, but I'm thinking more about how do you make sure that trust is applicable across all those? How are you managing your ethics and your usage policies for those? Because it wouldn't take a huge amount of deviation from a one or two agents to actually cause a bigger issue across the whole piece. Because everything becomes, even though it's not connected, it's not like, you would have, I don't know, one endpoint, call it one endpoint, and if one falls over, everything falls down. You're going to have one that might go rogue, and it will be very, very difficult to understand where that piece was in the puzzle, because they are all interdependent and not really necessarily reliant on everything being up to get a result. So I don't know. I think that is going to be I don't think it's going to be a barrier as such, but I think it is going to cause issues. And I wouldn't be surprised if we hear some stories in the future where just the sheer scale or number of agents has caused a problem somewhere along the lines.
Yeah, for sure.
And cost is always going to be an issue. But my one gripe about this at the moment from a Microsoft perspective is that we don't have a consistent licensing or cost model across the AI stack. The example I always use is Security Copilot, because that is in effect consumption based, and you have a minimum, 8K or whatever it is a minimum cost that you have to have for Security Copilot. You've got some that are license based, some that are free, some that are going to be from other areas. So that is my pet peeve at the moment, is that there isn't really a consistent way of saying, okay, I've got an agent that's going to cost me X a month. I've got 20, and it's all going to be costed the same. But no, some of them might be licensed, some of them might be consumption, some of them might be free. Yeah, I'd imagine that is going to be a challenge as well in the future.
Yeah.
I didn't have anything else to add, apart from I feel like I always have to add something about sort of getting the bygone days of computing. And I was having a talk with a family member the other day, just to sort of round this off on a slightly lighter note, possibly. And he just brought a new laptop, and he bought like 32 gig, laptops, fairly high spec. And he was asking me, do you know why the Windows system file is using 4 gig of memory? And I was like, well, actually, I have no idea. But I wonder if there's like a scaling in there. So like, you've got this amount of memory, we will allow you to take, I don't know, 10% of it or something, and then have a cap on it. So that wasn't the query that got me thinking about. And David will probably remember this. I'm not sure about Cyrus. You might be too young, Cyrus. That when I start my first PC, and we've talked about this with the turbo buttons and stuff like that, 640K of memory. That was it. That was the base memory. And in effect, you pretty much had to have everything core running within that 640K. You had extended and expanded memory, but again, you're talking megabytes here, not gigabytes. And that did, I just wonder now whether there's a difference between people developing with those constraints that meant that applications had to be more streamlined, they couldn't be too memory intensive. And now we don't have those same level of constraints. So everybody just goes, I don't really care about memory management and anything else. And let's just develop what we need. And if it uses 4 gig of memory, great. If it's available, let's use it. And that's possibly the whole thing. I think this also is relevant to the DeepSeek stuff, because they developed a more cost-effective LLM, primarily because they didn't have access to a lot of the sort of high-end NVIDIA chips. So anyway, that just hit my brain last weekend.
Yeah, I've been busy working on one of my blog posts, which is sort of similar. So the difference between interpreted and compiled apps, because if you're using something like Python, it's really, really easy. And I've been experimenting with it, and you can do all sorts of awesome stuff. Is it efficient? No.
Yeah. And I think people don't care about that anymore, do they?
But people are, and I think you've got the path of least resistance. Well, I've got a machine with 128 gig of RAM. Do I worry about memory? No. Am I developing to worry for something that's going to run on 4? Absolutely not.
Yeah.
And I think you've had these conversations, right? Developer workstations, the bigger spec you give the developer, then that's going to be expected of the user, right? And so there is a conversation there to be had for sure, Richard. Yeah.
Anyway, I thought I'd throw that in the end there, just to hark back to the better times.
If I can add one thing that David shared just before the live session, that I think that it should be shared. It's a very good article. You talked about research center, David, and there's this article you said that actually I want to do the same now. Like there's a part of me that I thought back in the day I could be a researcher, but I'm not patient enough. And this guy called Sean Heelan, he have a blog, and that one was it blew my mind. So he used O3 on. I play a lot, for whoever knows. I play a lot with the O3 model of OpenAI, and the guy went beyond what I could imagine. He was able to find a CV, so a security breach, a 0 day if you want. Those are normally expensive. You can resell them to good people or bad people. I mean, it's a massive thing. So you find a 0 day code CVE 2025, the year 37899. It's a remote 0 day vulnerability in Linux kernel's SMB implementation, and it's SMB free. It's supposed to be like well implemented, and it's not a really focus area. The SMB, for instance, was used for the first known ransomware because they exploited that at scale. I don't remember the name exactly of the first one, but it was very known. And he explained in his blog his thought process, how he leveraged this O3, how he started to treat the agent like a researcher. And it's impressive how simple and humble he was about the discovery about such a thing. So I think we have the tool today to do the same. I mean, there's bug bounty is a thing if you work in security, and it seems to be the golden age for everyone. For I know there's a lot of bad things we hear about AI and things, but it's a golden age for me as an opportunity. So thanks for sharing that article, David. Probably we share that.
You see, now you've got me started on something else, Cyrus. So you're right, because if you can do that, that's a really cheap way of getting access to sort of 0-day vulnerabilities in theory, because usually they are costing. And I think there's a stat from some report that actually says they're actually very rarely used in the wild because of the cost. But I was reading about the M&S and co-op hacks the other day, and there was an article that was hinting that it might have actually been an inside job. So I will link the article to here just to it's validated. But they were implying that somebody paid off basically a member of staff in the support team to hack into the systems for you. So again, you've got sort of a least, path of least resistance piece. Perhaps that's going to cost a couple of grand. I don't know what the price is for that. Perhaps a cheap 0-day as opposed to actually spending the money to do a complicated and complex hack. And you can see the chaos that the M&S one in particular has caused. But yeah, so there you go. Leave it on a downer.
Let's leave it on up. So bonus points for anyone that can guess the film from my T-shirt. We won't say anything, but for anyone watching, for those listening, tough. You're just going to have to watch us back at some point.
Well, perhaps I'll put it in as the cover art for the episode, so they can pick it from there. But anyway, I think that pretty much wraps it up for us. So thank you for whomever has joined us live on LinkedIn. Please feel free, and there are a couple of comments I can see on the feed at the moment. Please let us know how that worked, whether it came through well, whether the sound was good, all that sort of stuff. But also, again, about the content as well, whether it was interesting. Any feedback is going to be appreciated and incorporated, hopefully. If you did like what you saw and heard from this one, obviously we do this typically on sort of YouTube and Spotify. So please just go and search for Cloudy with a Chance of Insights on your platform of choice, and you can find either the YouTube one video or the sort of podcast elements as well. And again, likes, follows, subscribes, depending on the platform, are always appreciated. But on that note, I'd just like to say thank you for everybody for joining, and I will speak to you in 2 weeks' time, give or take.